This is a much more comfortable group size for me. I am not a public speaker. This is outside of my comfort zone. Start with that. Also, the presentation is hand done. I didn't use any tech for this, so I don't expect you to be able to read this. This is largely for my benefit. They'll be there for the Q&A at the end in case it's a helpful memory jogger. Who was able to read the book? Awesome. Quite a few of us. Very good. And whether or not you did, there's a ton of online resources. He's made a bunch of media appearances. There are other ways to engage with this content if reading the book's not for you. So hopefully if you didn't read it, this will wet your whistle to engage with these topics after this chat. It is also my hope to have this be like the beginning of a group that actually is trying to practically implement some of the things that he talks about at the end of the book for our community. I don't know how much we'll talk about that side of it tonight. But this is just kind of I wanted to get something done this semester to kind of get the juices flowing for everyone. So again, feel free to slow me down. I will go too fast. If you need me to repeat, wave. Otherwise, at the end, we'll have plenty of time to chat about these concepts. So he began this book as a look into how social media is damaging American democracy, how it has broadly disrupted society, fragmented public discourse, Congress journalism, and other foundational democratic institutions. He pivoted to focus on this project not only because of how disturbing some of the data was, but also because there's a lot we can do immediately if we link up and speak up. And so this is a really cool first step for us to do exactly that. The main thesis is that beginning in the 80s, in America in particular, but other Western countries as well, we started overprotecting kids in the real world. There's, this group, if you're here right now, you pretty much probably understand a lot about that. And then he compares it to recently where we've completely unprotected them online. So those are the two main kind of theses that he's working with. He talks about how the well-intentioned but disastrous shift towards overprotecting children and restricting their autonomy has removed the challenges present during play that for so long inoculated children to be able to handle life's challenges. Tech and overprotection are experience blockers, so that's the other side of it. And throughout the book, he talks a lot about collective action problems. So those are traps that we can only avoid if we coordinate and act together to make choices that are better for everyone in the long run. And he talks about 4 foundational reforms throughout the book. I put them here to start. No smartphones before high school, no social media before 16. Phone-free schools is increasingly one that we might have some control over if we can link up and speak up about it. And then obviously based on the font size, my favorite, far more unsupervised play and independence. Super important stuff. All right. We can regain control of our own minds. We are all affected by the most rapid rewiring of human relationships and consciousness in history. It has become harder for all of us to think, focus, forget ourselves enough to care about others, and build close relationships. We know that collective threats don't depress us, but isolation does. There's a lot of research about that. He takes the time to pull out 5 important features of human childhood. The first being slow growth. So humans' planet-changing trait, and he's talking about what we brought to the table differently than other mammals even, is our ability to learn from one another. We pool ancestral and community knowledge. So human childhood, evolutionarily speaking, lengthens to make learning possible, as well as provide 3 motivations to make learning easy and likely, which are also the next 3 on this list. And that is free play, attunement, and social learning. Free play, as anybody who knows anything about Montessori knows, play is the work of childhood. In play, we learn the way neurons like best with repeated activity and feedback from success and failure. Play enables the formation of long-lasting cooperative bonds. Physical play outdoors with mixed-age children is the healthiest, most natural, most beneficial. When play becomes less free, it becomes less beneficial. Experience, not information, is the key to emotional development. The third important feature of human childhood is attunement, which is the tuning and synchronizing of movement and emotions with others. Attunement is as essential for social development as movement is for physical development. That sounds really obvious. It's not always at the forefront of adults' minds. So I'll repeat that. Attunement is as essential for social development as movement is for physical development. When kids are deprived of opportunities for attunement, they have difficulty with healthy attachment throughout life. They are less able to cope with challenges, regulate emotions, and make sound decisions when risk is involved. The fourth feature is social learning. Humans have evolved several strategies as part of our propensity for culture. Conformist bias and prestige bias are two very common ones. Conformist bias is how we learn group norms, and prestige bias is how we determine who to mimic. It's very easy to see those in their negative light. There's some really positive things that we as humans get from those biases. However, they are easily and heavily exploited by social media, which has diverted time and attention from real world role models and mentors. The fifth feature for his purposes are expectant brains and sensitive periods. Humans have experienced expectant development. And so that means that specific parts of our brain show increased malleability during periods of life when we're likely to have certain experiences. The sensitive period for cultural learning appears to close later in puberty, which is maybe a little earlier than we'd like to think. Identity, selfhood, emotions, and relationships will look differently depending on where they develop, for the sake of this, online versus the real world. Discover mode and defend mode. Discover mode is where we see opportunities. Defend mode, threats. So similar to those biases, those are both important, but they have to work in concert with one another for it to be healthy. So we need both to work together, but the default mode matters. Being stuck in defend mode is an obstacle to learning, growth. Play-based childhood is nature's way of wiring brains towards discover mode. Kids are anti-fragile. Anti-fragile things need stress in order to be strong. Anti-fragility is a property of complex systems in order for them to function in an unpredictable world. So obviously humans need to be anti-fragile to exist in this world. Happiness comes from learning to deprive external events the power to trigger negative emotions. Thrilling experience has anti-phobic effects. Well-meaning adults often block the development of competence, self-control, frustration tolerance, and emotional self-management. Risks that kids need. We know this from observing them. This is not his own list. These are things that kids will do and learn from if they are allowed to. They need heights, high speed, dangerous tools, dangerous elements, rough and tumble play. They need to disappear sometimes. Those are all very basic needs of play that are met by play. We should be keeping them as safe as necessary, not as safe as possible. Parenting has become more intensive, protective, and fearful. The breakdown of adult solidarity has left parents on their own, and constant supervision of kids has further isolated them. Enter parenting experts. This really got going in the 90s, and ever since, and especially the online era has exploded with parenting advice, as I'm sure those of you who are parents are aware. So parenting experts' advice is a reflection of their own social and political views rather than any scientific consensus, usually. So then we get on to safetyism and concept creep. Concept creep is where a psychological concept expands in two directions to smaller, more trivial cases, and also to encompass new, conceptually unrelated phenomena. So safetyism is the result of concept creep, of the value of keeping our kids safe. It's obviously important to keep them safe. We have let it morph into something else that he refers to as safetyism. When safety takes over other practical or moral concerns, we're ultimately less safe. So this section, we're looking at the figure on there, figure 311. So you'll notice that breaks out where the real learning actually takes place. So discover and defend mode are embedded in the attachment system. I've found over the years that the attachment system is of particular interest to parents usually. So hopefully looking at this can kind of help you follow along with some of the other ideas he's talking about what's required for real learning to take place. Discover mode is where learning and neural fine-tuning take place. Development includes internalizing the secure base. New attachments throughout life will reuse the psychological architecture of the secure base. Psychologically safe groups accept disagreement and respectful criticism. Of course, there's no one right way to be a parent, but there are general features of human childhood. And they are that kids are anti-fragile. They benefit from risky play. They require setbacks, failures, shocks, stumbles in order to develop strength and self-reliance. All things we would like our kids to achieve, yeah? Safetyism is dangerous because it makes it harder for children to learn to care for themselves and to deal with risk, conflict, and frustration. Don't even try to read this one, y'all. This is for my reading. All right, so we'll talk about the human transition from childhood to adulthood and how it depends on getting the right kinds of experiences at the right time. Two important very basic brain development concepts are pruning and myelination. Pruning is when we select neurons and synapses, which are frequently used. Myelination insulates the axons connecting constellations of neurons. And the point of bringing that up is that together these explain a huge trade-off. Again, remember we talked about how evolution extended human childhood so that we could learn from one another more. And that's the trade-off. Young children's brains have enormous potential with limited ability. That's where a lot of the frustrations arise. Puberty, once again, makes the brain more malleable, which makes it both a time of risk as well as a window of opportunity. There's ample evidence. It is also a sensitive period for cultural learning. We must remove experience blockers if we want children to have a healthy pathway through puberty so that they can accumulate the wide range of experiences they need, including the real-world stressors anti-fragile minds require to wire up properly. Rites of passage around the world share 3 phases: separation, transition, and reincorporation. Some evidence that children need rites of passage is that they will spontaneously construct them, these days often online, not always in ways that are supported by the broader culture. We should not let familial differences remove all common milestones in society. So I thought this ladder from childhood to adulthood was pretty good. Again, it really does line up with a lot of my knowledge from Montessori. Like, I think this is a good basic rule of thumb for those of you that either have kids approaching these ages or that are in these ages. At 6, they should be taking on family responsibility. At 8, we hope that they can have some local freedom. 10, roaming. By 12, their interests are probably apparent enough that something like an apprenticeship or like a super skill-based activity would be appropriate. And the rest are kind of built in. 14, they start high school. 16 should be the age of internet adulthood. 18, beginning of legal adulthood. 21, full legal adulthood. He talks about the 4 foundational harms. And he's primarily talking about social media. I think there's aspects of these that apply to our general usage of the internet, but they are social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction. Animal learning is the wearing smooth of a path in the brain, not decisions of a rational consciousness. The Great Rewiring has encouraged habits exactly contrary to our accumulated wisdom. Opportunity cost is the loss of other potential gains. When phones transitioned from a tool to platforms competing for our eyeballs, it had enormous implications for cognition. We know that children need face-to-face, synchronous, embodied physical play. The opportunity cost of screen time is all of that. Attention is the taking possession by the mind of one of several simultaneously possible trains of thought. When we fail to make a choice, it is the opposite of attention. With their immature frontal cortexes that are not done until about the mid-20s, sensitiveness to immediately exciting stimuli characterizes the attention of childhood and youth. So you can just see how social media hijacks that. The constant fragmentation of attention leaves permanent marks in rapidly reconfiguring brains. People cannot actually multitask. We shift attention back and forth, wasting a lot with each shift. Executive function requires self-control, focus, and the ability to resist off-ramps. Brain circuits involved with learning release a bit of dopamine, the neurotransmitter most centrally involved in feelings of pleasure and pain, but also wanting. The other figure on those pages is relevant now. It's figure 5.3. I'm going to go through this very quickly. The first 3 are the typical mammal behaviorism. For humans, we add a 4th step, which is investment. Think about all the apps. That's what he's talking about here. So once a human invests a little bit in this loop, then what we do is we internalize that trigger, and that can be taken advantage of. So persuasive technology takes advantage of this by internalizing the trigger for the next behavior. Our brains adapt to long periods of elevated dopamine. To maintain homeostasis, our brains counteract dopamine's effects. Universal symptoms of withdrawal show that addiction magnifies the other 3 foundational harms, which is social deprivation, sleep deprivation, and attention fragmentation. Those all lead to addiction, which then amplifies those ill effects. There is evidence that if addressed, our brains can usually readjust in just a few weeks. That's children and adults. This is such a solvable conundrum. All right, social media's effects go way beyond those who consume it. It has rapidly changed culture for everyone. Agency is the striving to individuate. Communion is striving to integrate with others. Defining the self comes from integrating into groups. Joining groups is demonstrating one's value as an individual. Emotions travel through communities over time, and happiness, as we know, is contagious. Contrary-wise, audience capture is the process in which people are trained by their audience to become more extreme versions of what their audience wants to see. Increases in the quantity of social connections reduce their quality and their protective nature. Data and attention are the new oil, and social media has hijacked deep evolutionary drives. Enter anomie, normlessness. We know that when social order weakens, we do not feel liberated. We feel anxious. Yes, we're all feeling that right now, yeah? All right, so he lists off some spiritual practices that can help connect us in our age of anxiety. Take and leave the ones of this that work for you. Shared sacredness, embodiment, stillness, silence, and focus, self-transcendence, being slow to anger and quick to forgive, and awe in nature. The profane is where we pursue our individual interests. The sacred is where collective interests can predominate. When there is no consensual structuring of time and space, everything collapses into an undifferentiated blur. We can reconnect with the rhythms of our calendar and our communities. We can endow time and space with some of the social meaning they have lost. We can train our minds to live in the openness of discover mode. The loss of self has a neural signature. The profane self is the default mode network. Awe shifts us out of this network, and we feel part of an ecosystem. The mind, left to its own devices, evaluates everything immediately, which shapes what we think next, which makes it harder for us to find the truth. Intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second. We have immediate gut feelings, and we make up stories after the fact to justify our rapid judgments. Does that sound familiar to everybody? You can think of a time you've done that, which is most of the time. Awe is triggered by two simultaneous perceptions. First, what we see is vast, and second, we cannot fit it into our existing mental structures. This combination seems to produce a feeling of being small in a profoundly pleasurable way. The 8 wonders of life, these aren't his, these are fairly well accepted broadly. And they are moral beauty, collective effervescence, nature, music, visual design, awe, life and death, and epiphanies. The beauty of nature is among the most reliable and accessible methods to trigger awe. Awe causes shifts in neurophysiology, a diminished focus on self, an increased pro-social relationality, greater social integration, and a heightened sense of meaning. We are what we think. Our souls take on the color of our thoughts. The ancients advised us to be more deliberate in what we expose ourselves to, and obviously what we expose our children to. Collective action for a healthier childhood. So again, collective action problems are traps, where each individual follows their own interests, leading to a bad outcome for all. When acting alone, it can feel costly to do the right thing, but when we act together, those costs go way down. Collective action problems require collective responses. Voluntary coordination, look at this. That's what we're starting with here, voluntary coordination. Social norms, moralization, technological solutions, and of course, rules and law. Let Grow is an organization he mentions a lot throughout the book. I am hoping that after this presentation, we can talk more about utilizing some of their ideas for our community here. Their overall mission is to make it easy, normal, and legal to give kids independence they need to grow into capable, confident, happy adults. Children, family, and schools are unique. Suggestions should be innovated and improvised to fit specific needs. So one thing I did like about this book versus other things along these lines are he really tried to make sure that there's something for everyone, and he's in no way saying that everybody should be doing all of these things. So that's up to kind of each of you to figure out which of these make sense for your family. They're just ideas. And if we can understand the nature of collection action problems, we can push for legislation that is targeted at breaking traps and changing incentives. We all know this next part, but I think we should be talking about it a whole lot more. Users are the product, not the customers, for social media companies, which are exploiting vulnerabilities of human psychology. Attention is being extracted and sold, literally. Government can and should change laws to incentivize responsibility from these companies, as well as change laws and policies that push parents and schools to overprotect in the real world. We are undergoing a race to the bottom of our brainstems. There has been a global collapse in the amount of attention available. This race to the bottom travels down a number of psychological vulnerabilities used to capture attention, many of which are grounded in our most basic needs. Tech learned a long time ago that reducing friction or effort increases time spent. 4 ways that government and tech could improve the virtual world. This list of his is for adolescents. I think, again, it would be just a better internet for all of us. They should be asserting a duty of care. Companies have moral and legal responsibilities. Internet adulthood should be 16. We should be facilitating age verification, and schools are not schools if they have phones in their pockets. Government in the US is literally criminalizing play-based childhoods. 4 solutions to that. Stop punishing parents for getting kids real-world freedom. Current US law has little relation to the ages at which children develop abilities. The state engages in neglect when it mandates overprotection. This is still on the increase, y'all. This isn't going away right now. That's what we need to do. There needs to be more play in schools. Play-deprived children become anxious, unfocused, they learn less. We should be designing and zoning public spaces with children in mind. We need more vocational apprenticeships and youth development programs. Current standard schools are wasting a lot of potential. Government has the power and responsibility to address collective action problems. 2 big things schools could do using mostly resources they already have: phone-free schools. And he does get into this. Brevard High School did just ban phones, but there are different types of phone bans. And so I have not, maybe Sarah could tell us more about what kind of phone ban they do. Like the research is the phone can't be on the person or it is a distraction whether or not they're engaging with it. So phone-free schools, meaning those phones are locked up while they're in school. And of course, more free play, naturally. Phone bans do ameliorate 3 of the 4 foundational harms: attention fragmentation, social deprivation, and addiction. Things we can do about student fragility: longer recess, less adult intervention, opening playgrounds before school. Play club is another let grow thing that we could talk more about. Unstructured free play addresses head-on making friends, learning empathy, emotional regulation, interpersonal skills, creativity, innovation, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, self-direction, perseverance, and social skills. All really important things that we, I think, are experiencing what happens when we lack them. Kids can do so much more than we let them. Our culture of fear has kept this truth from us. Renormalizing childhood independence is a critical collective action problem. There is a double helix of anxiety and doubt when parents can't take their eyes off their children and kids can't do anything alone. Overprotected kids see everyday life as a minefield of potential failure and humiliation. Preoccupation with test scores cause our education systems to violate much of what we know, and we do know a lot of it scientifically, about child development, the benefits of free play, and time outdoors. Loose parts playgrounds offer kids control of their environment and agency. They build focus, compromise, teamwork, and creativity. We can create environments that activate biophilia, the love of life. There's abundant research that time spent in nature benefits social, cognitive, and emotional development. Kids will take responsibility for their safety if they're actually responsible for it. And phone-free and playful schools cost less than new curricula or more therapists. Free play is nature's way of providing children the skills they need in adulthood. All right. The work mindset of parenting. If I can find the right training, I can do the job well, and I can produce a superior product. That sounds funny to a group like us, but it's out there in culture, and the pressure's there whether or not you know better. There's a lot of different versions of this next metaphor. This is one of the clearest kind of brain tricks I've ever found for thinking of it. The carpenter versus the gardener. So the carpenter has a clear image of what they're trying to produce, whereas a gardener creates a protected and nurturing place to flourish. We cannot make children learn, but we can let them. So you'll all be surprised at how short my 0 to 5 section is. The function of a secure base is to be a launch point for adventures off base, which is where the most valuable learning happens. What you do matters more than what you say, and we should trust young children's deep desire to help out and provide them with responsibility so they feel essential. So I kind of did this before, but a lot more people have poked in. Who has a preteen or a teen? A few of y'all. Yeah. So again, outside of my wheelhouse, I picked out what I thought was important. So it's 6 to 13. It's a sensitive period for cultural learning and risk assessment. Interconformist bias, prestige bias, that starts to be a huge part of their development at this stage. To reduce overprotection in the real world and encourage productive off-base adventures. Again, this is a grab bag. Take and choose what you will. Practice letting them out of your sight without a way to reach you. Encourage sleepovers and don't micromanage. Encourage walking to school in groups. After school should be for free play. Go camping. look into sleepaway camps with no devices or safetyism, and form child-friendly neighborhoods. The cure for adult anxiety is exposure. We adults, whether or not we're parents, have to be mindful of the behaviors that we're modeling. We have little PVC phones on the play yard, and the kids all walk around with them like this. They don't all do that. A lot of them do that. And so just, they're mimicking us. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And they see that this is the most important thing in our lives. And we can all I think all of us, I'm sure, could do a better job of that. Put it away. We want them to put it away during school. We should be putting them away when we're with them. We can buy time for children's brains to develop self-control and less fragmented attention. These additional suggestions, he does have them in the preteen section. I think, again, they're relevant for, a number of these are relevant to adults and really just anybody engaging with the use parental controls and conflict filters. This next one I think is super important with all the pressure that a lot of you guys are under. Focus more on maximizing in-person activity and sleep more than counting screen hours. Yes, you want to be cognizant of your screen hours, but if you can maximize in-person activity and sleep, that goes a really long way towards fixing a lot of these problems. And then this is good for all of us too. Provide a clear structure for the day and week that will help you know when it is time to tune out in limited amounts. Watch for signs of problematic use. Be ready for digital detox. Delay social media until 16, and make sure you're talking with your preteens and listening to them as well. 13 to 18, we should be increasing their mobility as they grow. So should the boundaries of their world. Rely on your teen at home. Encourage part-time work. Find ways for them to nurture and lead. Consider exchange programs. They should all be having bigger thrills in nature and a gap year after high school that I sure wish I had. When parents surveil their teens, it increases everyone's anxiety and lack of confidence. Some risk is a part of any hero's journey, and there's plenty of risk in not taking the journey at all. To be a better gardener, increase unsupervised free play. Give them longer and better play-based childhoods with ever-growing independence and responsibility. The ultimate pleasure of trusting your child outweighs the temporary anxiety of letting them go. And that's all I have prepared. So that was just meant to be an overview of what I found important in this book. Maybe a jumping off point for this next section where we can ask questions, have a conversation. And one thing I did say at the beginning is there's a lot of other ways to engage with this content. The website is a plethora of information. He's done a ton of media appearances. So if reading the book's not for you, there are other ways to hear more about what he has to say and why.
That's how they're engaging with